Hello there, and welcome back. Tonight we are going to drift slowly through the ocean horror lore of Subnautica, from the first quiet crash on planet 4546b to the frozen secrets of Sector Zero, and then farther out toward the newer waters of Subnautica 2. This is a story about survival, but it is also a story about pressure, infection, alien mistakes, corporate hunger, lonely wrecks, giant creatures, and the strange beauty of a sea that never truly belongs to anyone. So settle in gently. Imagine the lights dimming inside a small underwater base. Imagine the glass holding back the dark. Imagine the sound of water outside the walls, not angry, not kind, just present. The ocean is waiting, and for tonight, we can enter it slowly. Subnautica begins with one of the cleanest horror ideas in science fiction. A person falls from the sky into an alien ocean, and the only way forward is down. The Aurora, a massive Altera starship, crashes onto 4546b after being struck by an ancient planetary defense weapon. Riley Robinson survives in a damaged life pod, surrounded by blue water, broken metal, and the huge burning shape of the ship on the horizon. At first, the horror seems simple. The ship is gone, the crew is gone, the life pod is small, the planet is mostly water. But Subnautica never leaves the fear at that surface level. The crash is only the doorway. The real nightmare is underneath. Planet 4546b is beautiful in the way a dream can be beautiful before it turns. The safe shallows glow with coral, fish, warm light and soft colour. Kelp forests sway in the current. Caves sparkle with minerals. Reefbacks move through the water like living islands, enormous and peaceful. This early beauty matters because it teaches the body to trust the sea just enough to enter it. Subnautica is not terrifying because everything is ugly. It is terrifying because the beautiful places are still dangerous. A shining cave can steal oxygen. A pretty fish can be part of an ecosystem that does not care if humans survive. The water invites attention before it punishes arrogance. The first great horror is oxygen. Before the lore opens into ancient disease and alien ruins, the sea teaches a smaller truth. A human body underwater is temporary. Every dive has a timer. Every cave has a cost. Every extra second spent collecting one more resource or scanning one more creature is borrowed from the lungs. This turns exploration into quiet suspense. The ocean does not need to hate Riley. It does not need to chase him. It can simply be water. It can wait while he misjudges distance, loses the exit, or follows a glowing tunnel too far. Subnautica's oldest monster is breath running out. Then come the creatures. At first, many of them seem almost funny. Peepers dart through the shallows. Bladderfish become water. Gasopods drift with strange, heavy bodies. Stalkers steal metal and flash their teeth in the kelp. The world feels alive, but not entirely hostile. That is important. If every animal attacked, the planet would feel like a simple gauntlet. Instead, 4546b feels like an ecosystem. Some creatures flee, some ignore, some graze, some defend territory, some hunt. That mixture creates better fear than constant aggression, because the mind has to keep asking what each new shape wants. The stalker is one of the first lessons in this uncertainty. It is not a leviathan, not the worst thing in the water, not even close, but it changes the tone of the kelp forest. Its long body, clicking movement, and habit of carrying scrap make it both dangerous and oddly believable. It belongs there. It has interests. It is not evil. It is an animal with teeth, territory, and curiosity. That makes it scarier in a quieter way. It cannot be reasoned with, and it cannot be blamed. It is part of the sea's ordinary life, which means danger is not an exception. Danger is normal. The aurora itself becomes a different kind of monster. From the outside, it is a burning landmark, a reminder of civilization broken open. From the inside, it is a haunted metal maze, flooded corridors, fires, broken doors, radiation, scattered data, and the absence of the crew turn the ship into a tomb. The horror of the aurora comes from the crash, and from the way the ship still feels busy with disaster after everyone is gone. The ship's scale makes Riley feel small in a human way, while the ocean makes him small in a cosmic way. Between metal and water, there is nowhere that feels fully safe. The deeper Riley explores, the more the planet begins to reveal that the crash was not random misfortune. The aurora was shot down by the Quarantine Enforcement Platform, an ancient alien weapon built by the architects, the species once called precursors by many survivors and data logs. That revelation changes the story completely. The planet is not simply dangerous because of wild nature. It is dangerous because an intelligent civilization made it into a prison. Ships are not allowed to leave. Ships are not allowed to arrive safely. The sky itself is guarded by old fear. The architects came to 4546b roughly 1,000 years before the aurora crash, because their civilization was being devastated by the Kara bacterium. Kara is one of the central horrors of the series because it is almost invisible compared to the leviathans. A reaper announces itself with sound and size. Kara hides in the body. It infects ecosystems. It spreads through contact. It turns the planet's beauty into a contaminated surface. The water holds predators, and it also holds disease. The horror becomes intimate. The threat is outside the suit and under the skin. Kara also explains why the architects built so many facilities beneath the ocean. Disease research, containment, quarantine, specimen storage, data centres, and power systems are scattered through the depths. These structures are cold and elegant, with green light, hard geometry, and a silence very different from the living sea. Entering them feels like stepping into another kind of water, not organic, but historical. The architects were brilliant, but brilliance did not save them. Their ruins are frightening because they prove that intelligence can fail on a planetary scale. The disease research facility in the Lost River is one of the darkest pieces of Subnautica lore. It was built to study Kara, but the facility was destroyed after a sea dragon leviathan attacked it. The sea dragon was not simply raging for no reason. The architects had taken its eggs for research, trying to understand or solve the bacterium through leviathan biology. The attack broke containment and helped spread Kara into the wider ecosystem. This is where the lore becomes tragic instead of merely frightening. The outbreak on 4546b was not caused by stupidity alone. It was caused by desperation, experimentation, and a living parent trying to recover its young. The sea dragon leviathan is terrifying because it belongs to extreme depth and heat. It lives near lava, swims through places that feel almost mythological, and dwarfs most other creatures. But the lore around it makes it more than a giant predator. It becomes part of the chain of suffering that defines 4546b. The architects needed a cure. They interfered with the Leviathan's eggs. The Leviathan attacked, the facility fell, the bacterium spread. The creature's parental violence became a planetary catastrophe because an advanced civilization treated living beings as research material. This is the special horror of Subnautica lore. The ocean is frightening, but the oldest disasters come from attempts to control it. The architects did not arrive as villains twirling knives in the dark. They arrived with a problem that could destroy them. They were trying to cure a plague. Yet their solution involved confinement, extraction, force, quarantine, and weapon systems that would later kill innocent travellers. The tragedy is not that they had no reason. The tragedy is that their reasons were strong enough to justify terrible things. The Lost River feels like the planet's memory. It is a deep biome of green brine, skeletons, ghostly water, and ancient remains. The place looks dead and alive at once. Its glowing river is not ordinary water, and its bones are too large to ignore. Leviathan skeletons lie there like monuments to a world older than Riley's emergency. The Lost River tells the mind that the planet has had many ages, many deaths, and many creatures large enough to make a human story seem brief. It is beautiful in a funereal way, like a cathedral built by extinction. Ghost leviathans make that funeral beauty dangerous. Their translucent bodies, bright heads and eerie cries turn deep water into a nightmare of movement. A ghost leviathan looks less like an animal and more like a spirit that learned how to bite. In lore, juvenile ghost leviathans can be found in the Lost River, while adults occupy the void beyond the crater's ecological edge. That placement matters. The crater is the playable, living island of ecology. Beyond it lies emptiness guarded by adult ghosts. The world has a boundary, and the boundary screams. The ecological dead zone is one of Subnautica's most brilliant horror ideas. Many games put invisible walls at the edge of a map. Subnautica puts open water and leviathans. It says, yes, you can go out there, but the world you understand is ending. The seafloor drops away, the useful biomes disappear, the water becomes huge and empty. Then the ghost leviathans come. The dead zone turns map design into ocean horror. It makes the edge feel like a place, not a barrier. It teaches that some emptiness is active. Before Riley, there was the Degassi. The Degassi crash happened years earlier, and its survivors left behind one of the saddest human stories on 4546b. Paul Torgal, his son Bart, and Margaret Mida survived long enough to build habitats, move deeper, argue, adapt, and slowly lose their battle with the planet. Their bases act like breadcrumbs through fear. A floating island base, a jellyshroom cave base, a deep Grand Reef base. Each one says the same thing more quietly than the last. They tried to live here, and the ocean kept asking for more. The Degassi storyline is frightening because it turns base building from comfort into foreshadowing. When Riley finds those abandoned habitats, he is seeing possible futures. The same tools that make a shelter can also become the walls of a tomb. A base with beds, lockers, groves and voice logs feels intimate because someone once believed it would hold. Then the glass cracked, the food ran low, the arguments sharpened, and the creatures outside kept moving. The Degassi ruins are not ancient like the architect's structures. They are recent enough to feel personal. Margaret Mida survives the Degassi disaster in a way that feels almost impossible. In the original lore, she fights a Reaper Leviathan and is dragged into the open sea, eventually surviving in ways that become clearer in Below Zero. Her survival matters because it shows another human response to 4546b. Paul tries to manage risk through caution and control. Bart tries to understand the ecology. Margaret survives through force, stubbornness, and adaptation. She is not comfortable, but she becomes part of the planet's harsh logic. She is one of the few humans who seems to frighten the ocean back. Bart Torgel gives the Degassi story its gentlest tragedy. He is curious, observant, and more willing than his father to see 4546b as a living world rather than a problem to endure. His logs carry a kind of wonder that makes his fate hurt more. He understands that the planet is not evil. He also cannot escape it. Through Bart, Subnautica makes a painful distinction between loving a dangerous place and surviving it. Appreciation is not protection. The sea can be understood and still kill. Paul Torgel's fear is also human. He is wealthy, used to authority, and deeply uncomfortable with losing control. On 4546b, status means almost nothing. Money cannot command oxygen. A title cannot stop a leviathan. A father's authority cannot make the ocean obey. His conflict with Margaret and Bart is more than family drama. It is the sound of human hierarchy failing under pressure. The planet strips people down to what they can actually do, and not everyone can bear that stripping. Riley's journey follows the Degassi path in reverse emotional order. He begins with emergency survival, then finds human traces, then discovers alien history, then descends into the deepest truth of the planet. The deeper he goes, the less the story belongs only to him. It becomes the story of Kara, the architects, Leviathan extinction, quarantine, failed rescue, and a mother trapped in a containment facility. By the time he reaches the primary containment facility, the ocean horror has turned into something almost sacred. The Sea Emperor Leviathan is the emotional centre of Subnautica. She is enormous, ancient, intelligent, gentle, imprisoned and dying. The architects kept her in containment because her species produced enzyme 42, the substance that could suppress or cure Kara. But the old Sea Emperor could not produce enough enzyme to save the world, and her eggs would not hatch under the architect's methods. She remained trapped for centuries, communicating through dreams and telepathy, waiting for someone small enough, strange enough, and free enough to help. The Sea Emperor changes the meaning of leviathans. Until her, leviathan usually means fear. Reaper, ghost, sea dragon, huge bodies in dark water. Then the Sea Emperor appears, larger than almost anything, and instead of becoming the final monster, she becomes the final mercy. This is why Subnautica's lore is so powerful. The biggest creature is not the enemy. The greatest horror is not the animal. The horror is the prison, the plague, the failed experiment, and the long loneliness of a mother whose children could not hatch. Hatching the Sea Emperor's young is the act that breaks the planet's nightmare. Riley gathers the ingredients for the hatching enzyme, helps open the way for the eggs, and allows the young Sea Emperors to leave containment. The young release concentrated enzyme 42 into the waters, curing Kara in Riley and spreading relief into the ecosystem. After centuries of quarantine, machinery, disease and failed control, the cure comes from life being allowed to continue. That is the gentlest answer the game could have given. The ocean saves itself when its imprisoned future is released. The death of the Sea Emperor is quiet and devastating. She has waited so long that her purpose is almost finished by the time Riley meets her. Once her children are free, she can rest. Subnautica's ending is escape from a dangerous planet, and also a funeral for the creature who made escape possible. Riley survives because an ancient being chose tenderness after centuries of captivity. The horror lore ends for the first game, with gratitude and grief under the deepest water. The quarantine enforcement platform becomes less monstrous after the cure, but not less tragic. It was built to prevent Kara from spreading beyond 45-46b. It shot down ships because the architects feared what infection could do to the wider universe. In a narrow sense, the weapon was doing its job. In a human sense, it murdered the sunbeam and the Aurora's survivors' hope of rescue. This is the coldness of machine ethics. The platform does not hate, it calculates containment. The result is still death. The sunbeam's destruction is one of the most brutal moments in the first game, because it arrives as hope. A rescue ship answers the distress signal. Voices speak from orbit. For a while, survival seems temporary. Then the platform rises from the island and fires. The ship is destroyed in the sky, and the ocean becomes lonely again. The explosion hurts, but the lesson hurts longer. The planet will not let help arrive. The quarantine has turned the whole world into a locked room. The warpers are another piece of that locked room logic. They are biomechanical hunter constructs created or repurposed by the architects to track and eliminate infected life forms. Warpers feel frightening because they do not behave like ordinary animals. Their teleportation breaks the comfort of distance. Their bodies look artificial and biological at once. Their purpose is not hunger, territory, or fear. Their purpose is enforcement. They are what happens when quarantine becomes a predator. Warpers also make infection feel visible. Once Riley is infected, the planet's systems recognize him as a target. The disease inside him changes his relationship to the world. He is lost, contaminated, and part of the problem the ancient machines were built to solve. That twist is important because it makes survival morally uncomfortable. Riley wants to escape, but if he escapes while infected, he could carry catastrophe beyond 45-46b. The planet is trying to stop him for a reason, even if the method is horrifying. The Reaper Leviathan is the face of Subnautica fear for many people. Its roar travels through the water before the body appears, and that sound does a lot of work. The Reaper is terrifying because it occupies spaces that feel almost reachable early on, near the Aurora, in dunes, around wreckage, in places where curiosity naturally leads. It is not hidden only in the deepest endgame. It is part of the planet's warning system. When the Reaper roars, the water itself seems to say turn back. The Reaper's design is simple and effective. Pale body, red fins, mandibles, speed, sound, and the ability to grab vehicles. The grabbing matters. Being bitten is frightening. Being held is worse. When a Reaper catches a seamoth, the machine that felt like safety becomes a shaking cage. The creature's face fills the view. The boundary between diver and ocean collapses. Subnautica understands that vehicles are emotional objects, and threatening them can be as scary as threatening the body. The seamoth, cyclops and prawn suit each create different kinds of courage. The seamoth is freedom and speed. The cyclops is a moving home, huge enough to feel like a submarine from a dream. The prawn suit is heavy confidence, a way to walk where swimming would feel too exposed. But none of them truly conquer the ocean. The seamoth has depth limits and fragile hull. The cyclops can attract leviathans and turn into a burning disaster if handled poorly. The prawn suit can descend into places where getting back up becomes its own horror. Technology expands the map, then gives fear new shapes. The Cyclops is especially haunting because it brings domestic sound into the deep. Its engine hum, interior lights, cameras, alarms, fire suppression, power cells and silent corridors make it feel like a small ship with a soul. When it is safe, it is one of the warmest things in the game. When something hits it in the dark, it becomes panic with walls. A leviathan outside the Cyclops is attacking a vehicle, and the idea that humans can bring a room into the abyss and call it enough. The lava zones turn the ocean into something older than water. Heat, fire, magma, and extreme depth combine into a place that feels like the planet's inner wound. By the time Riley reaches those areas, the journey has moved far beyond coral survival. The environment looks almost mythic. Sea dragons patrol. Lava larvae drain power. The primary containment facility waits. The deeper story sits near the planet's heat, as if the truth had sunk all the way to the core. Subnautica's horror works because descent always changes meaning. At first, going deeper means finding better resources. Then it means finding abandoned survivors. Then alien disease research. Then the lost river. Then lava. Then the sea emperor. Every layer makes the previous layer feel smaller. The safe shallows are still beautiful, but by the end they seem like the surface of a much older wound. The map is wide, and it is psychological. Downward movement becomes revelation. After the cure, Riley builds the Neptune rocket and escapes, but even the escape has a strange aftertaste. The planet has been survived, not defeated. The Sea Emperor is dead. The architects are gone or scattered. The Degassy dead remain. The Aurora is still wreckage. Riley leaves with knowledge no one else fully shares. The Death Notice joke from Alterra after leaving the planet cuts through the grandeur with corporate absurdity. After all that beauty and terror, the company still sees numbers. It is funny because it is bleak. Below Zero returns to 4546b 2 years later, but it changes the kind of horror. Instead of the warm crater, it brings us to Sector Zero, a frozen region where the water is colder. The land matters more, and the mystery begins with a sister's death. Robin AU arrives to investigate what happened to Sam AU after Alterra claims Sam died through negligence. The premise is smaller and more personal than the Aurora crash. It is not about one survivor discovering a planet-wide quarantine by accident. It is about someone refusing to accept a corporate explanation. Cold changes ocean horror. Warm water can feel inviting before it becomes dangerous. Frozen water feels hostile immediately. Below Zero adds weather, ice, glaciers, snowfields, and the danger of exposure above the sea. The surface, which usually means relief in Subnautica, becomes another threat. That is a clever reversal. In the first game, surfacing gives air and light. In Sector Zero, the surface can bring freezing wind. Safety has shifted. The planet has more than one way to make a human body feel temporary. Robin's relationship with Alterra is different from Riley's. Riley works for Alterra, even if the company becomes absurd and distant. Robin arrives suspicious of Alterra from the start. She is a xenologist, a scientist, and a sister following grief. Her story turns the horror toward corporate secrecy. Alterra has returned to 4546b, not simply to understand, but to extract, contain, study, and perhaps profit from what nearly destroyed worlds. The ocean horror becomes institutional. The sea is dangerous, but the company is dangerous in a more familiar way. Sam Ryu's story is one of Below Zero's saddest threads. She discovers that Altera has found a frozen leviathan still infected with Kara. Rather than treating it only as a threat to be destroyed, Altera studies it, raising the fear that the bacterium could be used for profit, control, or weapons research. Sam tries to stop that. She creates an antidote, works with Margaret Mida, sabotages the project, and dies in the process. Her death is not negligence in the moral sense. It is sacrifice trapped inside a corporate lie. The frozen leviathan is a brilliant horror image because it makes disease feel preserved. Kara is more than a past crisis solved by the Sea Emperor's young. It remains in ice, held in the body of something enormous. The creature is dead, but the infection is not gone until Robin finishes what Sam started. That frozen body turns the past into a corpse that can still harm the future. It is quieter than a Reaper attack, but perhaps more disturbing. The old plague is waiting under frost. Robin using Sam's antidote to neutralise Kara in the frozen Leviathan is a small act compared to saving all of 4546b, but it carries deep emotional weight. It is a sister completing a sister's unfinished work. It is also a correction to Altera's way of seeing. The company sees dangerous biology as research value. Sam and Robin see it as a threat that should not be exploited. In a series full of giant creatures, this little act of injection becomes a moral turning point. Alan brings the architect's story into a more intimate form. Instead of only exploring ruins left behind by a vanished species, Robin meets a living architect consciousness stored in a sanctuary. When Alan transfers into Robin's mind, the alien presence becomes internal. The horror is out in the water, behind sealed doors, and suddenly sharing thoughts that could have been played only as fear. But Below Zero turns it into conversation, tension, trust, and eventually companionship. Alan's guilt ties directly back to the ancient Kara disaster. He was involved in research decisions that contributed to the outbreak on 4546b. He disobeyed orders, tried to hatch sea dragon eggs, and the resulting chain of events helped destroy the facility and release the bacterium. This revelation makes the architect disaster personal. The first game presents the architects largely through ruins and data. Below Zero gives one of them a voice, and with that voice comes shame. The architects become more tragic through Alan. They were not gods, though their technology may look divine beside human tools. They were people, or something like people, capable of fear, hierarchy, error, secrecy, and regret. Their civilization was ravaged by disease, and their attempts to survive led to more suffering. Alan's return to a body is a science fiction objective, but it is also an attempt to face the consequences of an old mistake. Robin and Alan leaving through the phase gate at the end of Below Zero opens the universe beyond 4546b. For ocean horror, that ending is strange and almost gentle. The planet that once seemed like the whole nightmare becomes one point in a wider history. The architects had a homeworld. Their network may still hold secrets. Kara may have shaped more than one world. The ocean horror expands into cosmic grief, but it never loses its connection to bodies, water, and survival. Margaret Mida's return in Below Zero is one of the strongest human links between the games. She survives from the Degassi era into Sector Zero, living with rough independence and a pet snow stalker named Preston. Her presence feels almost legendary, but she is also practical, suspicious, and wounded by survival. Margaret makes the ocean horror feel survivable, though never easy. She has become the kind of person who can live near monsters without pretending they are friends. Margaret also represents the opposite of Altera. Altera watches from orbit, builds facilities, writes reports, and classifies risk. Margaret knows the planet through scars, muscle, suspicion, and lived roots. She does not need corporate permission to understand danger. Her distrust of surveillance and control fits the larger series perfectly. Subnautica often asks whether knowledge comes from systems or from attention. Margaret is attention with a knife in its hand. Below Zero's leviathans shift the horror again. The shadow leviathan, iceworm, caliceret, and other large creatures make Sector Zero feel dangerous in its own language. The shadow leviathan in particular has a deep sea nightmare quality, with a mouth and body that make darkness feel alive. The iceworm brings horror onto land, breaking through snow and ice, so that even walking above the water does not feel safe. Below Zero understands that the planet's threat should not end at the shoreline. The iceworm is frightening because it attacks from beneath a surface people usually trust. Ice and ground suggest solidity. Then the worm erupts, and solidity becomes another kind of water, something that can hide movement underneath. This is Below Zero's cleverest land horror. It takes the Subnautica fear of unseen movement below the body and translates it into frozen terrain. The ocean is no longer necessary for the old fear to continue. Sector Zero also uses abandoned Altera bases as haunted spaces. Research stations, labs, mining sites, and outposts create a sense of recent evacuation. Unlike ancient architect ruins, these places are human enough to feel familiar. That makes them uncomfortable. A chair, a bed, a lab bench, a poster, a recorded message, a broken hallway. These details say someone was here recently. They also say someone left quickly, lied afterward, or did not leave at all. The series' horror lore depends on absence. Empty life pods, empty bases, empty alien sanctuaries, empty research labs, empty ships. Even when creatures are everywhere, the human spaces are usually quiet. That quiet makes the story feel discovered after the fact. Subnautica rarely places a crowd in front of the mystery. It leaves recordings, ruins, bodies implied rather than shown, and machines still running after their purpose has failed. The ocean is full of life, but the human story is full of rooms where voices have stopped. That contrast is why the PDA and voice logs are so important. A recorded voice in Subnautica often arrives after the speaker is already dead, missing, or unreachable. The log turns the ocean into an archive. People leave behind fear, jokes, arguments, research notes, apologies, and warnings. The sea keeps those fragments without caring what they mean. Listening to them inside a base or vehicle feels intimate, almost intrusive. The dead speak because the living arrived late. The architect's data functions the same way on a larger scale. Their facilities contain fragments of science, containment protocol, medical desperation, and quarantine logic. They are not diary entries in the human sense, but they still reveal fear. A civilization does not build planetary weapons and deep containment facilities unless it is terrified. The green alien rooms may look calm, but every wall is made from panic refined into architecture. Subnautica's ocean horror is often called thalassophobia, fear of deep water, but the lore gives that fear narrative roots. The water is frightening because it hides scale, limits breath, muffles sound, and erases certainty. The lore adds infection, quarantine, vanished civilizations, corporate cover-ups, lost crews, leviathan intelligence, and technology that may kill without malice. The result is fear of water and of what water preserves. Wreckage, disease, bodies, eggs, ruins, secrets, and unanswered calls all remain below. The creatures of Subnautica are not demons, and that makes them stronger. The Reaper does not hate Riley. The ghost Leviathan is not an evil spirit. The sea dragon is not a villain for protecting its eggs. The ice worm is not wicked for bursting through ice. Even the aggressive fauna of Sector 0 and 4546b are usually animals acting from instinct. This makes the ocean morally unsettling. Human beings want enemies they can blame. Subnautica gives us ecosystems we have to respect. The architects, by contrast, are blameworthy and sympathetic at the same time. They made terrible decisions, but they made them under plague pressure. They imprisoned the Sea Emperor, but they were seeking a cure. They built the quarantine weapon, but they were trying to prevent cosmic infection. They created warpers, but they were enforcing containment. The law refuses to flatten them into evil ancients. They are more frightening as a failed civilization than they would be as villains. Altera is frightening in a different way, because its mistakes feel familiar. Corporate language makes danger sound manageable. Research value can become more important than moral responsibility. Employee deaths can be explained away. Surveillance can be called safety. Biological threats can become assets. Altera does not need alien grandeur to disturb us. It only needs paperwork, profit motive, and distance from the consequences. In Subnautica, the ancient ruins are cold, but the corporate voice can be colder. The Kara bacterium links all of this together. It is biological horror, historical horror, ecological horror, and corporate horror. It devastated the architects, justified quarantine, infected 4546b, trapped the Sea Emperor, targeted Riley, haunted Sector 0, killed through secrecy, and tempted Altera into research that should have ended. Kara is terrifying because it outlives intentions. Good intentions, bad intentions, scientific intentions, corporate intentions. The bacterium does not care. It spreads if given the chance. Enzyme 42 is the opposite of Kara, but it is not a simple magic cure in emotional terms. It comes from a living leviathan, from an ecosystem, from a creature the architects failed to understand with enough humility. The cure is not found by dominating the planet. It is found by helping life continue. That contrast gives the first Subnautica its quiet moral centre. The plague is control and spread. The cure is relationship and release. This is why the Sea Emperor's imprisonment remains one of the saddest facts in the whole series. She is trapped physically and trapped in a role. To the architects, she is a possible cure source. To the planet, she is the last old mother. To Riley, she becomes guide and saviour. Her full personhood, if that word can be used for something so ancient and alien, has been reduced by everyone else's emergency. Her tenderness at the end feels miraculous because she has every reason to be bitter. The horror of eggs runs through the lore in a subtle way. Sea dragon eggs are taken. Sea emperor eggs refuse to hatch. The future of entire species is held inside shells behind glass. Eggs are fragile, hopeful, and frightening because they are life not yet able to defend itself. The architect's failure around eggs becomes a failure around the future. They try to force what must be cared for. The result is collapse. The ocean itself becomes a nursery and a grave. Young sea emperors carry cure into the water. Juvenile ghost leviathans grow in the lost river. Reefbacks drift like gentle elders. Dead leviathan skeletons lie in brine. Frozen leviathans preserve infection. Sea dragons mourn stolen eggs through destruction. Across the series, giant creatures are more than boss-like threats. They are family lines, ecological pillars, old wounds, and moving pieces of planetary memory. Subnautica 2 moves the series away from 4546b to a new alien ocean world, and because it is still in early access, its lore should be handled carefully. The confirmed setup is that a new pioneer arrives through the Cicada colony mission. Humanity is seeking a new life, and something goes wrong. The ship's AI insists the mission should continue. The world contains new biomes, creatures, tools, base building, co-op survival, biomods, and mysteries that are still unfolding. The horror is no longer only the quarantine of an old plague planet. It is the uncertainty of settlement. That new premise is quietly frightening. The first Subnautica is about escape. Below Zero is about investigation and unfinished grief. Subnautica 2 begins with the idea of making a home. Ocean horror changes when the goal is not simply to leave. A base becomes more than a temporary shelter. A colony mission carries the dream of permanence. But permanence underwater is a dangerous dream. The sea surrounds every wall. The ecosystem predates every plan. A mission can continue long after the people inside it should be asking whether it still makes sense. Subnautica 2's biomods deepen the body horror side of the series. Instead of only building better tools, the pioneer can adapt through biological modification inspired by alien life. That idea is beautiful and disturbing at once. It suggests learning from the planet, but also changing the body to survive it. The older games already asked humans to wear equipment, pilot vehicles, and depend on alien enzyme. Subnautica 2 moves that dependence inward. Survival becomes something written closer to the skin. The new ocean's horror also comes from co-op, which may sound strange at first. Shared survival can make the sea warmer. A base can hold multiple people. A dive can become a joint plan. But the ocean is large enough to make even a group feel small. Someone can swim out of sight. A voice can vanish into distance. A rescue can fail because depth, oxygen, or creature behaviour gets in the way. Solitude is frightening, but responsibility can be frightening too. Subnautica 2 turns loneliness into a choice, and then asks whether company is enough. The collector Leviathan, revealed through development coverage and discussed in current updates, points toward the new shape of Leviathan fear. It is designed as a distinct large threat, associated with tentacles, grabbing, crushing, and readable behaviour. That matters, because Subnautica cannot rely forever on the Reaper's old roar. Each ocean needs its own nightmare. A new Leviathan must do more than be large. It must make a region feel claimed. It must change the meaning of distance. It must make the water around it feel aware. Across all the games, the real pattern is clear. Subnautica horror begins with a body in water, then expands into systems. Oxygen, hunger, thirst, pressure, predators, wreckage, infection, quarantine, research, corporate secrecy, alien guilt, colony ambition. Each layer is frightening by itself, but together they create the feeling that the ocean is not a backdrop. It is the place where every system is tested. Bodies fail there, machines fail there, civilizations fail there, corporations reveal themselves there. Even hope has to be waterproofed. The most important thing is that Subnautica never lets horror erase beauty. The safe shallows remain beautiful even after Karar is known. The Lost River is beautiful even with bones and ghosts. The lava zone is beautiful even with heat and sea dragons. Sector 0 is beautiful even with grief and corporate lies. The new ocean of Subnautica 2 is beautiful even while it hides unfinished dangers. Beauty is not the opposite of horror here. Beauty is the reason horror can reach so deeply. A world no one wanted to enter could not frighten us the same way. That is why the base window is one of the most important images in the whole series. Inside is air, light, storage, tools, maybe a bed, maybe a plant, maybe the soft hum of power. Outside is everything else. Fish pass by. Darkness thickens. A leviathan may be far away or not far enough. The glass holds for now. That small phrase, for now, is Subnautica's soul. Every safe place is temporary, and every temporary safe place is precious. The terror of Subnautica is deeper than the chance of being killed. The ocean keeps teaching humility. Riley cannot leave until he cures himself and disables a quarantine built by a dead civilization. Robin cannot understand Sam's death until she faces Altera's hidden research and Alan's ancient guilt. The pioneer in Subnautica 2 cannot simply build a future without listening to the world that future is entering. The sea keeps reducing big plans to small truths. Breathe, watch, learn, return, respect what was here before you. The ocean horror lore, taken as a whole, is a story about the cost of not listening. The architects did not listen enough to the creatures they studied. Altera did not listen enough to the danger of Karar or the people warning them. Paul Torgal did not listen enough to the planet or to the people surviving beside him. Rescue ships did not understand the quarantine. Humans arrive with plans, and the ocean answers with consequences. Those who survive are usually the ones who learn to pay attention. And yet Subnautica is not hopeless. Riley cures the infection and leaves. The Sea Emperor's children swim free. Robin finishes Sam's work and helps Alan face his past. Margaret survives against all reason. Bases can be built, vehicles can return, strange life can be studied without being destroyed. Even in Subnautica 2's unfinished new sea, the act of building a room under alien water carries hope. The series is frightening because survival is hard, but it is comforting because survival is possible. The comfort never becomes simple though. Riley's escape does not erase the dead. Robin's truth does not bring Sam back. Alan's new body does not undo the outbreak. A base does not tame the ocean. A cure does not make every past experiment forgivable. Subnautica's hope has scars in it. That is why it feels adult without needing to be cynical. The sea gives life, takes life, hides life, and sometimes, after enough patience, allows life to continue. The horror of 4546b also lives in the way its regions change the meaning of safety. The safe shallows are bright, but they are not safe in an absolute sense. The name almost feels like a joke after enough time. Safe means safer than the abyss, safer than the dunes, safer than the lava, safer than the dead zone. It does not mean harmless. Crashfish can still burst from their plants, caves can still disorient, oxygen can still vanish. Even the opening biome teaches the central rule of the series: safety is comparative. The ocean never gives it without conditions. The kelp forest is one of the first places where beauty starts to move like a warning. Tall creep vines sway through green light, and the whole biome feels alive with vertical motion. It is lovely from a distance, almost calming. Then stalkers flash between the stems and the metal scrap glints in their jaws. The kelp creates partial cover, which means the eye never gets a complete answer. Something may be behind the vines. Something may be following. The beauty of the place comes from movement, and so does the fear. The grassy plateaus open the world outward. Red grass rolls across broad terrain, reefbacks drift above, and wreckage waits among the open spaces. This biome is less claustrophobic than caves, but the openness creates its own unease. A person can see farther, but also be seen from farther away. Sand sharks and biters make the place active near the ground, while larger shadows overhead remind the body that there is always another layer. The plateaus are not the deepest horror, but they teach scale. They make the map feel wider than the first life pod could suggest. The Jellyshroom Cave is where Subnautica's beauty becomes almost hypnotic. Purple glow, giant mushrooms, narrow paths, and the old Degassi base make the cave feel like a dream under the floor of the world. But the cave's beauty is trapped beauty. Once inside, the ceiling becomes a problem. The route back matters more than the view. Crab snakes slip in and out of the jellyshrooms, turning the lovely shapes into hiding places. The Degassi base down there makes it worse, because someone once believed this cave could be shelter. The cave answered with pressure, distance and time. The floating island carries a different unease, because it rises above the water and still does not feel free of it. The island's huge floaters hold it over the sea like a biological impossibility. It has sunlight, plants, and abandoned Degassi habitats, which should make it comforting. Instead, it feels stranded in another way. The land is temporary looking, suspended by living things, surrounded by the same ocean that swallowed everything else. The Degassi story on the island begins with hope, food, shelter, air, a place to stand. Later bases show how that hope kept moving downward. The mountain island is more openly frightening because of what waits inside and around it. The quarantine enforcement platform rises there, an alien weapon disguised at first as architecture. The island has beaches, caves and sunlight, but it is also the place where rescue dies. When the sunbeam is shot down, the island becomes a stage for the planet's law. The sky is not open. The atmosphere is not escape. The island is not freedom. It is the place where the ancient machine proves that the quarantine still has teeth. The blood kelp zone feels like the ocean growing a nightmare garden. Pale stems, blood oil sacs, dark water, and strange vertical growth make the region look less like a reef and more like a body turned inside out. The name alone is doing work before the eyes understand it. Blood kelp is useful, which makes the area more unsettling. Subnautica often places necessary resources in places the body would rather avoid. The horror is not simply seeing a frightening place, it is realising progress requires entering it. The Grand Reef has a melancholy openness. Floating anchor pods, blue shadows, and deep open water make it feel like a place where the world is holding its breath. It is beautiful, but not cosy. The Degassi deep base in the Grand Reef gives that beauty a broken human centre. By the time the survivors reached that depth, their story had narrowed into desperation. The deeper base feels like the point where hope stopped being architecture and became denial. The ocean outside is majestic. The human rooms inside feel doomed. The dunes are frightening because they remove comfort. Sand stretches outward, visibility becomes strange, and reaper leviathans patrol spaces that can feel too open to defend. There is less vegetation, less visual softness, less sense of shelter. The area feels exposed, as if the ocean has taken away decoration, so fear can stand plainly. A reaper in a cluttered biome is terrifying because it emerges. A reaper in open water is terrifying because there may be nowhere meaningful to hide. The crash zone turns human disaster into predator territory. The aurora's broken hull dominates the horizon, and the surrounding water feels polluted by wreckage, radiation, and reaper presence. The ship is a symbol of advanced civilization, but around it the sea has already reasserted itself. Metal does not make the ocean civilized. The aurora becomes terrain, hazard, shelter, tomb, and feeding ground all at once. Its wreckage tells the story of how quickly technology can become part of an ecosystem that never asked for it. The mushroom forests are among the stranger gentle places. Huge mushroom-like trees create an alien woodland underwater, and the biome can feel almost safe compared to the more aggressive regions. That relative calm matters. Subnautica needs places where wonder is allowed to dominate for a while. Yet even calm alien beauty carries unease, because the trees are so large, so unfamiliar, and so clearly not designed around human scale. The forest is peaceful, but it still makes the body feel like a visitor in someone else's dream. The bulb zone is bright and alien in a different way, full of glowing bulbs and electric life. The region has a kind of glassy, luminous beauty, but its creatures and layouts keep it from becoming soft. Ampeels and bone sharks can make the light feel dangerous. The glowing plants, which might look comforting from a distance, become part of a hostile route when the body needs resources or fragments. Subnautica often uses glow as a lure. Light does not always mean safety. Sometimes it means the dangerous thing is easier to see. The underwater islands create a floating geography that feels unstable by nature. Islands should be land. Here they hang beneath the water, suspended in blue space. The biome makes the mind uneasy because it breaks a basic expectation. Up and down feel less reliable. The islands are beautiful, full of strange forms and wreckage, but they also imply that the ocean can rearrange even the idea of terrain. In Subnautica, geography is not always solid. Sometimes the ground itself floats. The Sea Treader's Path is one of the gentlest, eerie places. Sea Treader leviathans walk slowly across the seabed in groups, huge and peaceful, leaving resources in their steps. Their movement feels ancient, almost ritualistic. They are not horror creatures in the direct sense, but they deepen the ocean's mystery. A giant animal that ignores the survivor can be just as humbling as a giant animal that attacks. The Sea Treaders make the planet feel old enough to have roads not made by people. The cragfield, sparse reef, and other quieter regions help the world breathe between terror peaks. These areas may not be as famous as the Lost River or the Reaper Zones, but they give the map necessary quiet. They make 4546b feel broad instead of simply staged. Not every place has to be a climax. Some places are lonely, rocky, odd, or muted. That emptier feeling creates a different fear, the sense of being far from help without a dramatic monster announcing the danger. The ocean is not always loud when it becomes unsafe. The active lava zone feels like entering the planet's anger, but the inactive lava zone is perhaps stranger because it feels like a threshold. It is hot, deep, red-lit, and close to the truth, but it still holds a sense of passage. The Cyclops becomes heavy with importance there. Power matters, root matters, lava larvae matter. The deeper the descent goes, the less the journey feels like ordinary survival. It becomes pilgrimage through heat, pressure, and old mistakes. The lava castle and the alien thermal plant show the architects using the planet's own heat as infrastructure. That is one of the most impressive and unsettling facts about their civilization. They did not merely build on 4546b. They inserted themselves into its deep systems. The thermal plant makes the architects feel powerful, but also intrusive. They turned volcanic heat into function. Yet all that power still ended in quarantine, collapse, and empty rooms. The plant hums with the arrogance of a civilization that could harness a planet but not save itself. The primary containment facility is the final contradiction of the first game's horror. It is a prison and a sanctuary, a laboratory and a nursery, a machine complex, and the home of the Sea Emperor. Its water is calm, almost sacred. After so much danger, the deepest place becomes quiet. That quiet is not simple peace. It is the quiet of something waiting too long. The facility's horror is not pursuit. It is captivity stretched across centuries. The architect portals add to the dreamlike structure of the planet. Teleportation gates connect distant places, making geography fold in ways that feel almost magical, despite the science fiction explanation. A portal is useful, but it also suggests how differently the architects understood space. For Riley, distance is oxygen, battery, depth, and risk. For the architects, distance could be engineered. That difference makes their absence feel even larger. The species that could fold space still could not escape consequence. Ion cubes are another small object with huge lore weight. They power alien systems, gates, devices, and ancient machines. To the survivor, they are resources. To the story, they are proof of a technological layer far beyond Altera's tools. Their green glow links many alien structures into one visual language. Each cube feels like a piece of a dead civilization's heartbeat, still storing energy after the bodies and voices are gone. The alien containment facilities and data hubs suggest that the architects may have tried to preserve consciousness when biological bodies failed. This idea becomes much more important through Alan in Below Zero, but its roots are already present in the first game. Kara threatened life so severely that identity itself had to become portable. Minds could be stored, moved, cached, perhaps saved. That is its own horror. When disease makes the body unreliable, civilization begins looking for ways to abandon the body. Subnautica's body horror is quiet, but constant. Infection shows on the skin. Oxygen warnings remind the lungs of their weakness. Depth limits punish fragile vehicles. Food and water pull attention back to flesh. Bleeders attach themselves to the body. Warpers mark infected organisms. Lava heat threatens equipment. The series rarely needs gore. It understands that having a body at all can be frightening under the wrong conditions. The infection visuals are especially effective because they make the survivor part of the planet's crisis. Green pustules and scan results are not abstract lore, they are personal. The body has become evidence. This turns the cure from a story objective into a bodily need. Riley is not saving the world from a distance. he is carrying the world's sickness. The horror has crossed the boundary between environment and self. Bleeders, cave crawlers, and other smaller threats help keep the body humble. Leviathans get the grand fear, but little creatures make the world constantly uncomfortable. A bleeder is not majestic, it is disgusting and immediate. A cave crawler is not cosmic, it is irritating, fast, and physical. These creatures stop the horror from becoming only awe. Sometimes the ocean is not grand. Sometimes it is just something small biting at the worst moment. Mesmers create a different kind of fear, the fear of perception being stolen. Their hypnotic effect turns beauty into danger very directly. The creature looks strange and almost lovely, then the mind and body are pulled toward it. The horror is not force at first, it is invitation. Mesmers fits Subnautica perfectly, because the whole series is about being lured by beauty. They literalise that danger. Look too closely, and looking becomes obedience. Crab squids bring intelligence and malice closer together, or at least the feeling of malice. Their electrical pulses can disable technology, making them terrifying around deep bases or vehicles. A crab squid attack threatens health, tools, light, and confidence at the same time. The creature's design feels almost like a nightmare of a face attached to a deep sea machine. Around them, the ocean feels less like wilderness and more like a haunted laboratory. The sea dragon, reaper, ghost, sea treader, reefback, sea emperor, iceworm, shadow leviathan, and collector leviathan all show how flexible the word leviathan is in this series. It does not mean one kind of threat. It means scale big enough to change the emotional weather. Some leviathans are peaceful. Some are wise. Some are territorial. Some are hungry. Some are part of ancient tragedy. A leviathan is a creature so large that the surrounding world has to be understood in relation to it. Reefbacks deserve special attention because they are peaceful giants in a frightening world. Their calls roll through the water with a deep, mournful sound. Early on, those calls can scare anyone who does not know the source. Then the creature appears, huge and harmless, carrying life on its back. Reefbacks teach one of Subnautica's best lessons. Not every large thing is a threat. That lesson makes the dangerous large things scarier, because the game has earned trust before breaking it. The sea treaders teach a similar lesson through movement. They are ancient-looking, slow, and almost ceremonial. They do not need to attack to command respect. Their path across the seabed makes the ocean feel inhabited by lives with routines older than human arrival. Peaceful leviathans are essential to the lore because they stop scale from becoming only horror. Scale can also be dignity. The Sea Emperor is dignity turned into sorrow. Her telepathic messages are mysterious at first, almost frightening, because they arrive without explanation. A voice inside the mind is never entirely comfortable, but as her meaning becomes clear, the fear softens into grief. She is calling not to manipulate, but to ask for help. Her power is enormous, yet her situation is helpless. That reversal is the emotional key to the first game. The Emperor's young change the planet's future in a way that feels mythic but biological. They are not weapons. They are not machines. They simply live and release the enzyme their species naturally carries. The cure spreads because a life cycle continues. This is one of the most beautiful ideas in the whole series. After so much ancient technology fails, biology succeeds by being allowed to be itself. The Neptune rocket is often remembered as escape, But in law it also marks a final act of trust in engineering, after engineering has failed so many times. The Aurora failed, Degassi habitats failed, Architect facilities failed, the Sunbeam failed, yet Riley still builds a rocket. Survival requires using technology without worshipping it. The rocket works because the planet's biological crisis has been solved first. Machine escape becomes possible only after ecological repair. Below Zero's horror begins more emotionally because Robin arrives with a purpose beyond survival. She is trying to live and trying to understand a death. That changes how every abandoned base feels. A corporate outpost is more than salvage. It might hold the missing piece of Sam's story. The frozen region becomes a crime scene stretched across ice, caves, labs, and old alien structures. Sam Ayu's death is painful because it sits at the intersection of courage and accident. She tries to stop dangerous Kara research. She makes a cure. She hides it. She works with Marguerite. She takes action. Then the sabotage kills her. Her plan is morally brave, but not clean. That messiness makes it believable. People trying to do the right thing inside dangerous systems do not always get heroic endings. Sometimes they get misreported as negligent employees. Altera's explanation of Sam's death is one of the most realistic horrors in the series. A leviathan can roar, a corporation can file. The second can feel colder. By turning Sam's death into negligence, Altera does what institutions often do when truth is expensive. It makes the dead responsible for the circumstances that killed them. Robin's investigation is personal, and it is resistance against a story designed to close too neatly. The frozen Leviathan is the perfect object for that resistance. It is too large to be ignored, too dead to defend itself, and still dangerous because Kara remains inside it. The body is evidence. It proves that Altera was dealing with something far more serious than ordinary research. It also connects Below Zero back to the first game's deepest crisis. The plague was cured in one sense, but human interest in it did not die. The old horror survived because someone found it useful. Omega Lab, Vi Robotics, the copper mining site, Outpost Zero, and other abandoned Altera spaces create a corporate ghost story. Each place holds a different part of the company's attempt to work in Sector Zero. Research, mining, robotics, surveillance, sample collection, logistics. The bases feel practical, but their emptiness makes practicality eerie. A desk under alien snow can be as haunted as a ruin if the person who used it vanished under a lie. The copper mining site is especially good at turning extraction into claustrophobia. Mining beneath an alien world already feels invasive. In Below Zero, the industrial structures, tunnels, and resources make the place feel like Altera is digging into a body it does not fully understand. The horror of mining comes from possible attacks in the dark, and from the arrogance of assuming everything under the surface is material waiting to be taken. Outpost Zero has a different sadness. It feels like the edge of a human attempt to live and work in impossible cold. Beds, equipment, abandoned rooms, and the traces of daily life make it feel less like a dramatic disaster and more like a workplace after the meaning has drained out. Subnautica's human horror often comes from ordinary spaces placed in extraordinary danger. A break room on an alien planet is funny until it becomes lonely. Alan's presence in Robin's mind creates one of the few sustained conversations in the series. The first Subnautica is famously lonely, with most voices arriving through logs or transmissions. Below Zero gives Robin someone to argue with, question, distrust, and eventually help. This reduces solitude, but it creates a new kind of intimacy horror. The mind is supposed to be private. Alan turns thought into shared space. The architect bodybuilding process in Below Zero is also quietly unsettling. Robin gathers organs, skeleton components, tissue, and materials to fabricate a new vessel for an alien mind. The task is scientific, but it has a ritual feeling. A mind without a body asks a human to assemble form from fragments. It is resurrection through machinery. It is birth without infancy. It is also a reminder that the architects crossed boundaries between biology and technology that humans barely understand. Alan's final return to a body is hopeful, but not simple. He carries guilt back into physical form. He wants to know what happened to his people, but he also fears the answer. His homeworld is not presented as a guaranteed paradise. It is a question beyond the phase gate. Robin leaving with him turns the ending into a leap from ocean horror into cosmic uncertainty. The sea has been survived, but the universe remains deep. Margaret's base in Below Zero feels like survival turned into personality. It is rough, defended, practical, and almost cosy in its own hard way. Her greenhouse, her snowstalker companion, and her blunt suspicion all show that life on 4546b can continue outside corporate systems. She is not cured of trauma, she is not softened into a guide, she has simply endured long enough to build rules that work for her. That kind of survival is admirable and sad together. Preston, Margaret's snowstalker, gives Below Zero an unexpected domestic detail. A dangerous planet still has room for companionship. The snowstalker species can be frightening in the wild, but Preston is part of Margaret's small world. This contrast fits Subnautica perfectly. The same planet that kills can also form bonds. A creature category is never the whole truth. Relationship changes meaning. The land sections in Below Zero are sometimes debated, but for horror lore they matter because they make 4546b less predictable. The original game trains the body to fear water and love air. Below Zero complicates that by making cold air dangerous. Hypothermia becomes another timer. Caves, snowfields, bridges, ice, and iceworm territory create a second survival language. The body is not safe just because it is dry. The glacial basin and Arctic spires have a lonely harshness different from the warm crater's loneliness. Snow absorbs sound. Visibility can narrow. Landmarks disappear in weather. Iceworm attacks make the ground unreliable. The horror is less fluid, but still subterranean. Something beneath you, something hidden. Something the surface failed to reveal. Below Zero proves that Subnautica's ocean fear can migrate into ice. The Mercury 2 wreckage in Below Zero adds another layer of old human disaster. Like the Aurora and Degassi, it shows that 4546b has been collecting failures for a long time. Wrecks are the planet's human fossils. Each one marks a moment when technology met the world and lost. Exploring them is useful, but also invasive. The survivor cuts through the remains of someone else's emergency to continue their own. The Calicerates brings the Reaper-like fear into Sector Zero, but its design has a different texture. Its mouthparts and pale body make it feel like a deep-sea crustacean nightmare. It patrols open water where the cold world drops away. The Calicerate is not the Reaper repeated exactly. It is Sector Zero's own warning that beauty near the surface can still lead toward Jaws. The Shadow Leviathan is Below Zero's most elegant deep horror. It feels smooth, dark, and almost too designed for the abyss. Its attacks inside the crystal caves and fabricated caverns make those beautiful spaces feel dangerous. The crystal environments are bright and strange, but the Shadow Leviathan turns that beauty into exposure. Light bounces through structures while something huge moves between them. Again, Subnautica makes the pretty place risky enough to be remembered. The crystal caves are a strong example of Subnautica's late-game beauty. Crystals suggest clarity, structure, and fragile brilliance. The cave itself is luminous and alien, but the region is also deep, dangerous, and tied to architect progression. The beauty does not calm the story, it sharpens it. A place can look like treasure and still function like a trap. The Fabricator base, where Alan's body is built, has an ancient solemnity. It is not as emotionally warm as the Sea Emperor's containment space, but it carries another kind of weight. It is a place made for transformation. A consciousness that has survived as stored data can become embodied again. Robin helps make that possible, and in doing so crosses one more boundary between human and architect history. When looking across the series, the horror often comes from boundaries being crossed. The Aurora crosses into quarantine space. The architects cross into the Sea Emperor's life cycle. Kara crosses from facility into ecosystem. Warpers cross distance through teleportation. Alan crosses into Robin's mind. Alterra crosses moral lines around the frozen Leviathan. Subnautica 2 crosses from survival into settlement. Every crossing opens possibility, and every possibility has a shadow. The ocean's sound design, though not strictly lore, becomes part of how lore is felt. A data entry can say a Leviathan exists, but a distant call makes the existence bodily. A log can say a base failed, but the silence inside it makes failure real. A warning can explain oxygen, but the alarm turns explanation into panic. Subnautica lore is not delivered only through text. It is delivered through pressure, noise, darkness, and the way a room sounds after the lights come on. The absence of traditional combat dominance keeps the lore honest. Riley, Robin, and the Pioneer survive through attention, tools, mobility, and adaptation more than conquest. This matters because the story repeatedly warns against domination. The architects tried to dominate biology and failed. Alterra tries to dominate risk and truth and becomes morally rotten. The safest path is rarely to own the ocean. It is to learn enough to pass through it without causing another disaster. This is also why scanning feels so important. Scanning is humble compared to fighting. It says, first understand, the scanner turns fear into knowledge without necessarily removing danger. A scanned reaper is still a reaper. A scanned disease is still a disease. A scanned ruin is still part of a dead civilization. But knowledge gives shape to fear, and shaped fear can be survived. In Subnautica, curiosity is dangerous, but ignorance is worse. The base builder is the scanner's emotional opposite. The scanner reads the world. The builder answers it. One gathers understanding, the other makes a claim. Together they define the whole human response to the ocean. Learn and shelter. Too much shelter without learning becomes denial. Too much learning without shelter becomes exposure. Subnautica's rhythm depends on moving between the two. Subnautica 2's current direction adds a third response: adapt. Building tools and rooms is no longer the entire answer. The body itself can change through biomods. That could become one of the sequel's most important horror ideas if the story leans into it. A new world may demand better equipment, and perhaps a different human. Ocean horror becomes evolutionary pressure. The blight mentioned in Subnautica 2's current development and roadmap language gives the new ocean its own hint of ecological sickness. It should not be treated as fully explained before the story reveals more, but as an atmosphere it matters. Subnautica has always been interested in contamination, imbalance, infection, and ecosystems under stress. A new form of blight suggests that the series is not leaving biological unease behind with Kara. The new planet may have its own wound. The cicada colony ship makes Subnautica 2's horror feel social from the start. The Aurora was a working vessel that became a disaster. Cicada carries the idea of migration and future settlement. A colony mission is a promise made to many people. When something goes wrong, the failure reaches beyond personal survival into the possible failure of a shared future. The ocean is no longer only a place to escape. It is a place humans may be desperate enough to call home. That desperation matters because humanity's background in Subnautica 2 includes ongoing conflict pushing people toward a new life. A desperate species can be as dangerous as a desperate civilization of architects. The architects imprisoned leviathans because they feared extinction. Humans may try to colonize a planet because they fear what they left behind. Fear makes intelligent beings justify intrusion. The ocean horror may repeat in a new form if nobody learns from 4546b. The ship's AI insisting that the mission continue is one of the best new horror seeds. A mission can outlive context. A machine can preserve instructions after grief, damage, and uncertainty should have changed the question. In the first game, the quarantine enforcement platform is ancient machine logic still firing at ships. In Subnautica 2, the mission AI may represent another kind of machine persistence. Continue. Even when continuing may be the problem. That echo is subtle and powerful. Subnautica 2's co-op also makes the lore of ocean horror less solitary. The first game was about isolation. Below Zero softened that with Robin's conversations and Alan. The sequel allows shared survival. But shared survival underwater does not remove fear. It spreads it. A group can build, explore, and return together. But a group can also lose track of someone, argue over risk, or bring danger back to a shared base. The ocean can threaten community as well as individuals. The horror of a shared base is different from the horror of a solitary base. Alone, a base is private survival. Shared, it becomes the beginning of society. Storage, rooms, routes, vehicles, repairs, and windows become communal. That makes the ocean outside feel like a threat to more than one body. A flooded or damaged shelter becomes the failure of a small civilization. Subnautica 2's settlement premise can turn base building into a tiny version of the whole human project. The prawn-like return hinted in current update coverage, if it develops as expected, would bring back one of the series' most important feelings: heavy courage. The prawn suit in the first game allowed descent into places where swimming felt too fragile, but it also created its own fear. Weight is reassuring until the route goes vertical. A powerful suit can still become a coffin if the way back is misjudged. Subnautica technology is always like that, a solution that introduces a new nightmare. Across the series, there is a repeated pattern of rescue turning into danger. The Sunbeam comes to rescue Riley and is destroyed. Altera comes to research and creates new moral danger. Robin comes to find truth and becomes host to an alien consciousness. The Pioneer comes for a new life and meets a planet that may resist the plan. Rescue, research, truth, settlement, each noble or practical purpose enters the ocean and becomes more complicated. The sea does not allow simple motives to remain simple. The horror also comes from time. 4546b holds events separated by centuries: Architect research, Kara outbreak, Degassi crash, Aurora crash, Riley's cure, Robin's investigation, Altera's return. The planet does not experience these as separate stories in the way humans do. They are layers. A facility built 1,000 years ago can kill a ship today. A disease from ancient research can infect a frozen corpse found by modern scientists. A mistake made by Alan can shape Robin's life centuries later. The ocean stores time. Water is a perfect symbol for that storage because it preserves and erases at once. It corrodes metal, hides bodies, muffles voices, and grows life over wreckage. Yet it also keeps things waiting. A base can remain under pressure. A log can survive. A skeleton can lie in brine. A frozen leviathan can hold infection. The sea does not remember like a person, but it keeps evidence in its own cold way. The series' deepest fear may be that knowledge always arrives late. Riley learns about quarantine after the sunbeam is gone. He learns about Kara after he is infected. He learns about the Sea Emperor after centuries of her captivity. Robin learns Sam's truth after Sam is dead. Alan faces his guilt after the outbreak already reshaped the planet. The Pioneer arrives after Cicada has already gone wrong. Subnautica is full of people discovering what should have been understood earlier. That lateness gives the lore its melancholy. Survival is possible, but it usually cannot save everyone. Riley cannot save the Aurora crew. Robin cannot save Sam. Alan cannot undo the first outbreak. Margaret cannot restore the Degassi family. The Sea Emperor cannot recover the centuries taken from her. The best anyone can do is prevent the next disaster from repeating the last one. In Subnautica, redemption is often damage control with a trembling light. This is why the series feels appropriate for a slow night, even though it is horror. The horror is full of sorrow rather than shock alone. The ocean is not a haunted house full of tricks. It is a graveyard, a nursery, a laboratory, a wilderness, and a possible home. The fear is layered enough to move slowly through. One can pass from Life Pod to Kelp Forest, from Degassi Base to Lost River, from Sea Emperor to Frozen Leviathan, from Alan to Cicada, and feel the same deep current under every story. The current says that life wants to continue, and that continuation is never clean. The Sea Dragon wants its eggs. The Sea Emperor wants her young free. Kara wants to spread because bacteria do not have morality. The Architects want their civilization to survive. Altera wants knowledge and profit. Riley wants escape. Robin wants truth. Sam wants to stop misuse. Alan wants atonement. The Pioneer wants a future. Every desire enters the water, and the water tests it. Subnautica's ocean horror is strongest when no single desire gets to dominate. If escape were the only desire, the story would be simple. If cure were the only desire, it would become medical drama. If corporate greed were the only danger, the ocean would become background. Instead, everything overlaps. Biology, grief, machines, weather, ancient guilt, survival systems, and human ambition all move through the same water. The result feels dense, like the sea itself. The more one thinks about 4546b, the more the planet feels like a character without a voice. It does not speak in words except through the Sea Emperor's telepathy and the data left by others, but it expresses itself through terrain. The safe shallows soothe, the kelp forest hides, the dunes expose, the lost river mourns, the lava zone warns, Sector 0 freezes. The new Subnautica 2, Ocean, waits. Each place has a mood strong enough to feel intentional, even when the planet remains indifferent. Indifference is the key. The ocean is not evil, but it is not friendly. It can cradle a base in beauty and crush a careless body in the same hour. It can hold the cure to a plague and the disease itself. It can hide a mother and a weapon, a corpse and a future. That indifference makes every act of care stand out more brightly. Riley helping the Sea Emperor matters because the ocean did not require kindness. Robin finishing Sam's work matters because Alterra would have preferred silence. Care is small, and that is why it glows. Quarantine is one of the series' most important horror ideas because it turns protection into imprisonment. On paper, quarantining 4546b makes sense. Kara is too dangerous to let loose among the stars. The architects, having seen what the bacterium could do, created a system that would stop infected organisms from leaving. But from inside the quarantine, that same protective logic becomes a death sentence. The sunbeam is not infected in any meaningful personal way when it arrives. The Aurora's crew did not understand the old law they were entering. Riley cannot disable the weapon while infected. A system built to save worlds becomes a machine that kills individuals. That tension gives Subnautica a moral coldness deeper than ordinary monster horror. A Reaper may kill because it hunts. The quarantine enforcement platform kills because its rule says it must. The rule is not irrational. That is what makes it disturbing. Many of the worst systems in the series have reasons. The quarantine has reasons. Alterra has reasons. Architect Experiments had reasons. Reason does not guarantee mercy. In Subnautica, horror often begins when a logical system meets a living body and refuses to bend. The architects are frightening because their technology keeps working after their wisdom has failed. Their doors still open, their cubes still power devices, their platforms still fire, their portals still connect impossible distances, their data still explains pieces of a catastrophe. But the society that built those things is gone from 4546b, leaving tools without judgment. This is one of science fiction's oldest fears, and Subnautica makes it intimate. The machine does not need a master to be dangerous. It only needs a command old enough to have outlived its context. Alterra mirrors the architects in a human key. Its technology is less ancient, less elegant, and less cosmic, but its mindset can feel uncomfortably similar. Classify the problem, extract the resource, control the risk, explain the death, preserve the asset, move the mission forward. The architects did this with alien grandeur, and Alterra does it with corporate bluntness. The series keeps asking whether intelligence without humility always drifts toward the same mistakes, no matter what species builds the tools. Extinction sits under everything. The Sea Emperor species is nearly gone. The architects may have lost more than the games fully show. Kara threatens ecosystems and civilizations. The Degassi family line ends on 4546b, except for Marguerite's stubborn survival. The Aurora crew is reduced to scattered traces. Sam's life becomes a mystery Robin has to reconstruct. Subnautica is not always loud about extinction, but it surrounds the story with last things. Last mother, last messages, last bases, last chances, last breaths. The Sea Emperor's children create the opposite feeling, beginning after almost ending. When they leave containment, the moment feels tender because the future has been so delayed. Eggs held too long finally open. Young creatures swim into a world that had been waiting for them without knowing it. The cure spreads through new life, not through a final weapon. The series could have ended its plague story with a machine switching on. Instead, it ends it with children entering the sea. That choice makes the ocean feel sacred without turning it into fantasy religion. Sacred, here, means worthy of reverence because it contains life older, stranger, and more vulnerable than human plans. The Sea Emperor is sacred in that sense. Reefbacks are sacred in that sense. The sea treaders are sacred in that sense. Even dangerous leviathans carry a kind of sacred scale because they remind humans that the world contains powers not designed for us. Subnautica's horror is strongest when fear and reverence become almost the same feeling. Reverence is not the same as comfort. A sea dragon deserves respect, but respect does not make it safe. A ghost leviathan is magnificent, but magnificence does not make its territory open. The frozen leviathan in Below Zero is awe-inspiring, but its corpse still carries disease. This is one of the series' best emotional balances. It does not ask for sentimental love of nature in a simple way. It asks for attention to nature as something beautiful, dangerous, wounded, and separate from human preference. The word monster becomes unstable in Subnautica. The Reaper looks monstrous, but it is part of an ecosystem. The sea dragon is monstrous in scale, but its ancient violence begins with stolen eggs. The Sea Emperor is monstrous in size and gentle in spirit. Kara is monstrous without a face. The quarantine enforcement platform is monstrous without being alive. Altera can become monstrous through policy. By the end, monster is less a category than a question. What kind of harm is this, and what made it possible? That question keeps the lore from becoming simple creature catalogue material. A list of leviathans can be fun, but the real horror is the web connecting them. Sea dragons, sea emperors, architects, Kara warpers, quarantine, Degassi ruins, Aurora wreckage, Altera research, Sam's antidote, Alan's guilt, Cicada's mission. Every piece touches another piece. The ocean is scary because it is not a hallway of separate threats. It is a system of consequences. The first game teaches consequence through descent. The deeper Riley goes, the farther back in history he travels. The shallow crash is recent. The Degassi bases are older. The alien facilities are older still. The disease research facility reaches into the Kara disaster. The primary containment facility reaches into the last hope of a species. Depth becomes time. To go down is to move backward through causes until the present finally makes sense. Below Zero teaches consequence through investigation. Robin does not simply descend toward one final ancient truth. She moves between corporate sites, alien structures, frozen bodies, personal logs, and Alan's memories. The structure feels more fragmented because grief is fragmented. A sister's death is never just one fact. It is a set of missing explanations, avoided conversations, official lies, and objects left behind. Below Zero turns the planet into a family archive with teeth. Subnautica 2 as far as its early access story currently allows, seems to be teaching consequence through settlement. A new world is not yet a ruin in the same way 4546b was when Riley arrived. It is a place being entered by a human future. That makes the horror anticipatory. What will happen if the mission continues blindly? What will be built? What will be disturbed? What will be named resource before it is understood as life? The old games are full of aftermath. The new one may be about the moment before aftermath hardens. That is a powerful direction for ocean horror, because colonization is scarier when it begins with hope. Nobody needs to arrive twirling a villain's moustache. They arrive needing shelter, safety, and tomorrow. They build a base because a base is necessary. They scan creatures because knowledge is necessary. They extract resources because survival is necessary. The danger is that necessity can become a language that excuses everything. The architects knew that language. Alterra knows it. The pioneer may have to learn how not to repeat it. The ocean's beauty complicates that question, because beautiful places are easier to desire. A barren rock may not inspire settlement. A glowing reef, a rich biome, a planet full of life and resources, that is harder to leave alone. The more beautiful the world is, the stronger the temptation to call it home. Subnautica 2's title as a new mainline sequel matters for this reason. It is more than more water. It is the next test of whether humans can enter a beautiful alien sea without turning beauty into ownership too quickly. Ownership is one of the quietest horrors in the series. Alterra's debt message after Riley escapes turns survival into accounting. Corporate research turns Kara into property. Facilities turn alien land into worksite. Databanks turn creatures into entries. Base building, even when innocent, turns a patch of seafloor into home. The series is not against using tools or building shelter. It simply keeps the question alive. When does shelter become claim? And when does claim become harm? Riley's story avoids that question partly because he leaves. He builds only to survive, cures the infection, disables the gun, and escapes. Robin's story is more complicated because she arrives by choice and leaves with Alan through the phase gate, carrying herself into an unknown alien future. The pioneer may be the most complicated of all, because settlement means staying. In ocean horror, staying can endanger the one who stays, and the place being stayed in. The bases left behind across the series are therefore morally interesting. A base can be comfort, evidence, intrusion, grave, or seed of a colony. The Degassi bases are evidence of failed adaptation. Alterra bases are evidence of organised extraction and research. Riley's bases are personal survival. Margaret's base is hard-won independence. Subnautica 2's bases may become the first bones of settlement. The same building tool can mean very different things depending on the story around it. The ocean keeps reclaiming bases, and that may be the most honest image of all. No matter who builds, the water remains. It presses against glass, moves around foundations, carries sound through walls, and fills every failure. A base without power is not a house, it is a container waiting for the sea. This is why the hum of power feels so comforting. It is not luxury, it is active resistance against the planet's default state. Hull integrity in base building is a perfect little mechanical expression of the law. Build too carelessly, too deeply, or too ambitiously, without reinforcement, and the walls can fail. The game does not need a speech about pressure. It lets the base leak. The ocean enters through cracks, and suddenly the dream of shelter becomes a repair job. The system quietly says what the whole series says. Ambition has to respect depth. Vehicles have their own version of this lesson. The Seamoth, Cyclops, Sea Truck, Prawn Suit, Tadpole, and any future submersibles carry the fantasy of mobility through hostile water. But each vehicle has limits, and those limits create story. Depth modules mark thresholds. Power cells mark duration. Damage marks risk. Docking marks relief. A vehicle is never only a tool. It is a contract with distance, and the ocean is always looking for loopholes. The Cyclops voice saying systems are online can feel like the warmest sound in the first game. It suggests a bubble of order inside impossible water. But the Cyclops is also huge enough to attract trouble, complex enough to catch fire, and lonely enough to feel like a ghost ship when silent. It is a moving home that can become a moving tomb. That double nature sums up Subnautica technology better than almost anything else. The Sea Truck in Below Zero changes that feeling by becoming modular. It can be extended, rearranged, and adapted for different tasks. That fits Sector Zero's mixed terrain and mission structure. The Sea Truck feels less like a grand submarine and more like a practical answer to a fractured region. Its horror is less majestic than the Cyclops and more intimate, a small chain of modules moving through cold water, useful until something larger takes interest. The Prawn Suit feels powerful because it lets the body stand where it should float. It makes the survivor heavy. In an underwater game, heaviness feels like rebellion. The suit can walk, drill, grapple, and descend into punishing places. But that heaviness also makes vulnerability more dramatic. Falling too far, losing footing, misjudging a jump, or facing a leviathan in a heavy suit can feel worse than swimming. Power changes fear's shape. It does not erase fear. The horror of sound deserves one more quiet look. The Reaper's roar, reefback calls, ghost leviathan cries, the Cyclops alarm, oxygen warnings, PEDA messages, warper distortions, creature clicks, base flooding sounds, distant lava ambience, below zero wind, iceworm rumble. These sounds are part of the lore because they become how the world remembers itself in the body. A written log may be forgotten. A sound heard in the dark stays. Silence is just as important. The pause inside an abandoned base. The stillness after a transmission ends. The empty water before a leviathan call. The quiet room where Alan waits as stored consciousness. The frozen cave holding the leviathan corpse. Silence in Subnautica is rarely empty. It is pressure without noise. It is the ocean asking the mind to fill in what is missing. The series rarely shows human bodies directly, and that restraint makes absence stronger. The Aurora had a crew, but Riley finds mostly wreckage and logs. The Degassi survivors are voices and rooms. Sam is a sister reconstructed through evidence. Architect bodies are gone or transformed. The Sea Emperor's death is seen, but it is almost ceremonial rather than grotesque. Subnautica knows that imagining loss can be more haunting than seeing it piled up. That restraint suits the sleep-like pace of the lore. The story does not need gore to be heavy. It has enough weight in empty beds, dead signals, broken doors, old bones, frozen infection, and a mother waiting in containment. The horror is patient. It lets discoveries settle. It trusts the ocean to make absence large. If there is one moral thread through the whole series, It may be that survival without humility becomes another disaster. The architects survived long enough to build miracles, but not humbly enough to prevent catastrophe. Altera survives as a corporation, but its hunger for control makes it dangerous. Riley survives by learning the planet's truth and helping the Sea Emperor. Robin survives by refusing the official lie and honouring Sam's work. Al-An survives as mind and then body, but has to face guilt. Survival alone is not the highest good. How survival is achieved matters. That is why Subnautica's ocean horror can feel strangely kind at the end. Not because the ocean becomes gentle, but because the story allows learning to matter. Attention matters. Repair matters. Listening matters. Finishing another person's unfinished good work matters. Freeing trapped young matters. Refusing to exploit disease matters. The sea remains dangerous, but the human response to danger can improve. That is a soft kind of hope, and it lasts longer than a simple victory. The entire lore also has a circular feeling. The architects came seeking a cure and caused a wider disaster. Riley came by accident and helped release the cure. Altera returned seeking knowledge and nearly preserved the danger. Robin came seeking truth and finished a cure in miniature. Subnautica 2 begins with another arrival, another mission, another ocean that must be learned before it is used. The circle is not exact, but the echo is there. Every arrival asks whether this time someone will listen sooner. Maybe that is why the franchise stays so haunting. It is about the fear of deep water, and about the fear that intelligent beings keep entering deep water with shallow understanding. They bring tools before wisdom, mission before relationship, profit before caution, control before care. The ocean does not punish them like a moral judge. It simply reveals the cost. That makes the horror feel almost natural, like pressure equalizing. Still, the light keeps moving. That is the part worth holding on to. Riley's life pod light, Degassi habitat lights, Cyclops floodlights, Robin's beacons, Margaret's greenhouse glow, architect green, base windows in blue dark, the imagined lights of Cicada's pioneers on a new world. Subnautica is full of darkness, but it is also full of small lights people made because they were not ready to vanish. Those lights do not conquer the dark. They make a little space inside it. That is enough. A small base, a working fabricator, a charged vehicle, a cured infection, a freed egg, a finished promise to a sister, a new body for an old guilty mind, a room under alien water where breath is possible for one more night. Subnautica's ocean horror is vast, but its hope is often wonderfully practical. It is a hatch that opens, a tool that works, a route remembered, a voice answered, a creature spared, a morning reached. So the entire ocean horror of Subnautica can rest in one image, a small human light moving through impossible water. Around it are fish, teeth, ruins, wrecks, disease, ancient guilt, corporate lies, and creatures too large to measure without fear. Ahead of it is a depth that may contain death or an answer. Behind it is a base that may still have power. The light moves anyway, not because the ocean is safe, because the ocean is beautiful enough and the truth is deep enough that someone keeps choosing to go down. And now the water can grow quiet. The aurora can burn only in memory. The Degassi voices can fade back into their abandoned rooms. The Sea Emperor can rest in the deep with their children far beyond the old walls. Sector 0 can lie under snow and blue ice. the new ocean can keep its unfinished secrets a little longer. For tonight, there is no need to answer every signal, no need to enter every cave, no need to follow every shadow into the dark. Let the base lights stay warm. Let the glass hold, let the deep remain deep, and let the ocean breathe slowly outside until morning.